Welcome back to Hoops Lounge, with a show that always gives a hand to Boban Marjanovic. My name is Marc Griffin, a.k.a. Montreal Mark. Sporting Phil Boileau. We got on camera Justin Rowan, Cavs Canada. We're going to talk hoops this week in the NBA basketball. I'm going to start with a little poll. Twitter's been wonderful. Poll I did, and also our friend Josh Eberly did over the last couple weeks. Me this week, him 2 weeks ago. What guy under 25, Phil, would you want to build an NBA team around?
Well, since Eddie Curry is past his prime, I think I'd have to go with a player who can move up and down, who can hit his free throws. I'm going to have to go with my man, Karl-Anthony Towns. I wanted to pick Anthony Davis, but I feel he's a major injury waiting to happen. And Andre Drummond can't hit his free throws, so it doesn't count for my game. So I'm going to say Karl-Anthony Towns because, I think a dominant big man going forward. We saw the Tim Duncan mold. Makes sense. And he's a coachable guy. There's a bunch of other names that I like, but I think also that he can play without needing his athleticism will allow longevity in this game.
Justin?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Phil said there, and I think it's interesting that we're both picking a center. As much as it's a wing lead, and there's so much good point guard play and things like that, I still think you need that foundational center, because really the drop-off from that upper tier of centers to the rest of the pack is so dramatic. So if you want to pick a player to move forward with, for me, it's Karl-Anthony Towns, mainly for the health reasons, and I just feel like he's got the complete package. But the reason that I don't go for a guard or point guard or something like that is because even if you miss out on the upper tier of guys, you still are probably in the running for someone like Mike Conley. There's a bunch of good point guards coming into the league now: Emmanuel Mudiay, D'Angelo Russell. Even Canadian Jamal Murray is going to be entering the draft this upcoming summer. So even though he's not a point guard, he's someone that can initiate your offense. There's just so much depth with those lead guard positions that I think that if you're starting a franchise, you need to go with that cornerstone big man, even though it's becoming less and less of a big man league.
Yeah, and I agree myself. Phil, we got to see Cat play in person. Amazing guy, and I got to say that he's an amazing guy off the court, and that's vital. I mean, you look at these guys like Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, who's been with these teams forever, tends to be a high character guy, and that's something really important in this league since it's been inception. I wanted to give the survey results. Josh's had basically his question was 8 years to win a championship. Which guy under 25 would you have? Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, or other. The winner he had was Anthony Davis with 51%, and then Cat 22 and Kyrie 11%. My poll from yesterday, similar question: which guy under 25 would you build around? Kyrie Irving 17%, and Karl-Anthony Towns 18%, Brow 25%, and the winner was Kawhi Leonard with 40%, and over 500 people voted on that.
Yeah, that doesn't really surprise me. I personally, as much as I believe Kyrie Irving is probably going to be the best point guard in the league in about 4 years, when he's about 27, Steph Curry will be 32 at that point. Like I said, the point guard position is just so deep. It doesn't surprise me that Anthony Davis would win one of those polls, just because people have seen it. They've seen Anthony Davis play at a really high level. He really challenged Golden State in the playoffs with a questionable supporting cast. So there's the belief that if you put the right team around him, eventually he's going to succeed. I get that. Kawhi Leonard, I mean, if you're going to be picking a wing player, I guess he'd be the guy. It's funny because when you listen to NBA players talk about Kawhi Leonard, it almost seems like they're reluctant to give him the credit that he's probably due. And some of that might just be, it feels like he's been fed superstardom on a silver spoon, going with the Spurs, being developed properly in a system that really maximizes everyone. They don't see him go through the same struggles that LeBron James, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, that these guys have gone through. So it's really interesting to see how much, I don't know if it's resentment, but how much kind of trepidation players have before they start putting him in that MVP category, even though in my eyes, I would put him there. I would put him I'd put him above Paul George just by a little bit. I think George and Butler, I think we can comfortably say are better offensive players, but just the all-around game, the polish, and the fact that I think you could play Kawhi Leonard, you could put this fully formed Kawhi Leonard on any team in the NBA, and he would fit in seamlessly, just with his personality, everything that he can bring to the table, even when he isn't getting touches on offense. So I'd probably go with him just because it gives you so many options. But I understand why people would go with Leonard.
Although I think personally it depends in that 8-year span when you're planning to win, right? Because Kawhi, I forgot his exact age right
24.
now. But yeah, he's 24, so he's close to that, right? So if we're talking an 8-year span, we're talking close to 32 at the end of it. So he'll still be relevant, forbid any bad injuries. But we're talking about these other guys. We're talking about them walking into their primes at this point, right? Karl-Anthony Towns being 19, that'll be 27, 20. Right?
Yep.
And such. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's like, okay, can I have this player and have real good players around him right now? Then I think Kawhi makes a whole lot more sense than guys like Karl-Anthony Towns. But if we're saying we're starting a legit rebuilding process where we're going to have good players, that's where I start going Towns and Davis, because I think it's easier to surround a big guy with shooters and find 3-and-D guys rather than start your team with arguably the best 3-and-D guy in the league, and then need to find that rebounding and shooting and athleticism. And again, that's where Towns and Davis are there for me. But I get, and your point was great before, Justin. I think people have seen Davis do it. That's why he's getting this credit. But maybe I'm just overly pessimistic on his health going forward. Mm-hmm. But there's something about the intelligence, the overall size, body frame, and his health of Karl-Anthony Towns that makes me choose him.
And on health, I want to jump to the next topic here because we got a lot to cover today. Justin, I'm going to throw this to you. Joakim Noah, fracture, what is his shoulder, major surgery probably coming about. What do you do with this guy now at this stage of his career?
You let him walk. I doubt he has any trade value at this point. It's unfortunate, but really, I don't want to blame Thibodeau. I don't want to blame their coaching staff and their medical staff. But really, when he was playing through that plantar fasciitis in a lost season where Derrick Rose wasn't playing at all, that's an injury and that's an ailment that needs rest and recovery. And there were nights that he was playing 48, 52 minutes in an overtime game and things like that. That's the worst possible thing you could do. And I just think injuries happen. Injuries happen for any player. There's no real medical backing behind one guy being more injury prone than another. But when you have something wrong with your body and you don't let it heal properly, you don't give it that rest, you naturally compensate for it with other parts of your body, and overworking other parts to kind of alleviate the pain and the issues that you're having somewhere else could lead to further injuries. Obviously, shoulder's not related to a foot ailment, but we saw last year that he just had all these recurring injuries, the same type of things holding him back. At this point of his career, he's getting older. He still obviously has size as a 7-footer, but I can't see a team making a move for him. I think the Bulls are a team in flux. I think they need to acknowledge where they're at in the process of trying to build a contender, and they need to retool. Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, I don't think they have a future in Chicago. Jimmy Butler's the future. Outside of that, Mirotic is having a terrible year.
Bobby Portis.
Bobby Portis, I'm very optimistic on Bobby Portis. You obviously keep him around and see what you're doing with him. But reports are out there that they're looking to assess the trade value of Pau Gasol, Taj Gibson, and Joakim Noah. So those guys, well, not Pau, but those guys have been part of the Bulls franchise for a long time. And I think we're going to see a bit of a teardown this year, especially with one of the more notoriously cheap ownership groups in the NBA.
Bill, what's your trade machine there? How are you going to do something?
Look, I'm a little on the other side, I understand Noah is no longer the 40-minute a game, worth big dollars, defensive player of the year candidate guy. But I still think on the right team where you can play him in that lesser 15 to 20-minute role, allow him a bit of time. Like, imagine him in a Spurs system where he'd be allowed to take half a year off and play 15 to 20 minutes to back up your bigs. I mean, I realize they don't necessarily need him at this point, but that kind of like I think him. I don't think his career is over. I just think this is the part where, he's pulling a David West and he's realizing his role in the NBA is maybe a backup big off the bench, the other guy who can coach younger guys. Like imagine if they didn't have Kevin Garnett in Minnesota, having Noah next to Towns to kind of teach him that, like in that mentor role. And that's why it doesn't even bother me that much besides the salary in Chicago, because I'm looking at him like, you have these young guys. He's a great work ethic guy. You can teach them a lot. But it's like, where does he think? Like, I think the issue is more is he still thinks he's a starter on some level. He's being paid big money, and he feels kind of jaded because his career, as you mentioned, Justin, was kind of cut short by the old coaching regime. So where does he view himself right now, I think is almost as important as where we view him next year. I mean, he could step onto, look, if he was willing to take less money, almost every contender, I think, would take him for a reduced role and would justifiably do so. But at the same point, is he going to walk around for $5 million?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think he's probably willing to take that pay cut. But, like, it's not just health. This isn't like Anthony Davis where you have him missing games and then he comes back and is a complete monster. Offensively, Noah has completely declined to the point where he's often a liability, and especially next to Pau Gasol. I mean, those two together have just been terrible. So he's taken big step backs on both sides of the court. And I do agree, like, he is a strong work ethic guy, but when you compare him to Kevin Garnett, I'm not sure if he has kind of the same respect amongst today's young players coming into the league that Kevin Garnett would have. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns, it makes sense for him to look up to Joakim Noah or Kevin Garnett as a former MVP, face of the Minnesota franchise and all that. There's just so much connection there. He had played with Sam Mitchell. So you got an environment where there's a mentorship program going on. I mean, maybe this is just me not being the biggest Joakim Noah fan, but do young players grow up and be like, I want to be Joakim Noah? Or is that someone
Your
that
name
has
is
that?
Rudy Gobert, maybe.
Well, mentorship's an interesting thing. I can't remember which player it was, but he said his mentor early in his career was Stacey Ogman. And it's like, who would have thought of situations
Everyone
like
has
that?
those, and I think I just solved it. I think
I love those answers. I love whenever you get one of those. Like, that's great.
To be a coach, a coach on the court, a teacher is a completely different skill set than being a superstar, a great player. It's a willingness and ability to give back. I'm going to change gears. We talk about all these elite teams, but there's a few kind of rumbling below the surface. Damian Lillard has been lighting up the league for the last week. He's averaging 31, 10, and 5, four straight wins, I think, and they beat OKC the other night. What have you been seeing out of this kid in Portland?
I've been seeing a effective and tiny backcourt with him and CJ McCollum. It was funny, they had the game where CJ McCollum couldn't play because he wasn't listed on the active roster.
Right.
So you had to sit there and watch. Look, Damian Lillard, he needs to score a lot of points. If you look at that front court, Mason Plumlee, a bunch of these other guys, they have a bunch of 7-footers and a couple of wing D guys, but their points have to come from that backcourt. I mean, it's no surprise a guy like CJ McCollum's forced into scoring 20 points a game. I mean, it's nice having kind of a poor man's version of Lillard on your team. But at the same point, like, I think it's like this was to be expected. They lost a lot of their scores. He needed to pick up the slack. I don't know if long-term this turns into anything. Like, I still think that they need some serious talent in that front court to balance them out. As good as McCollum is, I may look to trade him with one of those bigs.
Really?
Well, the thing is, like, I don't think you're going to win when your two best players are both in your backcourt. That's just my view.
Justin?
I agree with you, Phil, but I don't think that's necessary to move CJ McCollum to do that. It's not like they're capped out at a point where they can't really add talent. As good as those two are, they're still going to be getting a pretty high pick in the draft. They're not in the playoff picture or anything like that. I think when you have two guards that talented, it gives the ability to win basically any night. Especially as we spoke about earlier, it is such a wing-dominant league offensively. So I think when they got Plumlee there, they got Myers Leonard. Those are nice bigs. I think those are really good rotational players. I just think, and they also have Noah Vonleh as well, who, I mean, he hasn't really taken a step forward, but this is still his second year in the league, and he's an incredibly young player. So if you're adding another piece in the draft, I think hopefully you get a small forward or something like that. Maybe you make a big run at a veteran big man as well. Al Horford's going to be available in free agency. I mean, Portland's a desirable location. So
but they landed DeMarcus Cousins with their pieces they have.
I don't think so, only because I don't think Sacramento is interested in trading DeMarcus Cousins at all at this point. It seems like the relationship with George Karl isn't as bad as it once was. So I don't think McCollum would be kind of the signature piece in that. Because, I mean, really look at the type of deals that the Kings have turned down at this point for Cousins. I mean, we're talking about some really, really high-level players that have been pitched to them. So I think you keep Lillard and McCollum together. You try to add either through the draft or through free agency that high impact guy. You got good role players in place already. Some good veterans as well. I think they have great coach. I think Terry Stotts does a fantastic job, and Jay Triano as well on the coaching staff. So I think you got a good support structure in place that's going to help bring these players up.
And they have Ed Davis, who shouldn't be
and Amino, who's quietly a very good player, actually.
Right. So you're talking about a lot of like key role players and rotation guys.
But that's exactly my point. I feel they're missing that front court. Now, you were alluding to it, but like, what are you going to pull in? Like a Rudy Gay who's going to bring more scoring? Like, I really think you need a legit 4 or 5. Like, as nice as these guys are, like
really I said, Al Horford's available. Who knows? You might be able to draft someone. Like if you draft a player, you can afford, with how young Lillard and McCollum are, you can afford to give them 3 years here to develop. You can have kind of that OKC mold where you're just counting on that internal growth and momentum there. I just don't think it's necessary to move one of your better pieces. And like McCollum, he's going from 6 points per game last season to like 20 plus this season. I don't think you're getting a ton of value because there's still a lot of unknowns there. People don't know if he's a looter in a riot. You're not moving Damian Lillard. So are you really getting that franchise cornerstone big man for CJ McCollum? I don't think so. So with that in mind, I just don't think you part with either of them. You just hope that you can either draft the guy, you can sign an Al Horford or something in free agency. Rudy Gay would be a good player to take a stab at, as you mentioned. Obviously not the cornerstone piece, but he would help. I just don't see moving McCollum or Lillard.
Okay, so let's switch gears again. A good Twitter follow, if you're into the D-League, is Chris Reichert, and he reported something a few days ago before everyone else. Baron Davis is on the comeback trail. Hasn't played ball. He's 36, hasn't played ball.
Still the best point guard in the league. I don't care.
4 years, Phil. Is he really going to do this?
He needs to be the Cavs' new starting point guard by Mike Kyrie. Well, he's technically the better player. Listen, at 37, I still think he can ball. I still think he'll be able to have some sort of a reserve role, but can he calm down his shot selection? I think that's going to be it. I think he's an intelligent enough player. I honestly think he can add that veteran presence, that 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 10 to 15. It would have to be the right team, though. I'm having trouble putting that team together. It has to be a team where I don't think your point guard can be your best player, because I wouldn't really want like Westbrook and Baron Davis in the same locker room. And I don't know if I'd want like any confusion on he's your best player. Although it would be fun for him to go to the 76ers, right?
He's not going there.
Baron Davis back in the day just pulling his hibachis. And that would be amazing. It would increase Jahlil Okafor's rebounding rate and Nerlens Noel, increasing their trade value, spend very little money. It sounds like a Sam Hinkie move. Baron Davis to the 76ers. I was hoping that Kobe would be traded there to do the same role, but if Kobe can miss shots, Baron can miss shots.
That piece of crap is on video. He will never play for the Sixers. Justin, where is he going to end up?
Is he the best? Would he be the best point guard on the Jazz? That's what I'm thinking. I mean, if they can forgive him for the Kirilenko dunk, maybe there's potential there.
Kirilenko's no longer there. And
I know, but hey, that
he would be an interesting guy to coach Exum, though. Sign him on a 2-year deal. Exum comes back, learns a bit under B. Diddy, and he can bring his kind of movie prowess to Salt Lake, which will never happen.
No. But he's not making the NBA, man. That's the answer.
He was always one of my favorite.
Where's he destined to? It's
the different YouTube highlight players, but that's where he resides.
Baron Davis was a great player back in the day, but like we're talking about a guy that's been out of the league for 4 years. He has a lot of health issues as well. Maybe he needs to do this kind of just for his own psyche here, give one last kick at the can kind of thing. But I think if you're asking where he's going to end up, it's the D League. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves if we're talking about his fit on a contender or where he could start. I mean, maybe he signs with Brooklyn. I mean, they don't have Jared Jack anymore, so maybe he's part of the recruiting pitch for Kevin Durant next summer. I can't really see him going anywhere. I love Baron Davis. It would be great to see him kind of latch on in some sort of veteran support role. I just, with that much time out of the league, I think we've seen more evolution in the NBA in how offenses and defenses operate in the past 7 years than any other time that I can remember. I mean, we see good coaches like Doc Rivers and, even Sam Mitchell, who wasn't a great coach, former coach of the year, but he's doing a terrible job in Minnesota. It looks like the league has passed a lot of these guys by that couldn't adapt. And if it's that difficult for guys and good coaches that aren't out there on the court, I think it'd be even more difficult for Baron Davis.
Okay, I got one more topic for today. Another great Twitter follow is Conrad Kazmarek, and he put this question out. Yeah, a friend of Justin's. Put this question out last night. It's kind of interesting. Which guy who's currently in the league right now is the most talented guy who will not make the Hall of Fame? Phil.
Talented guy will not make the Hall of Fame. Well, Baron Davis is not in the league right now.
He is not.
So, if you have a faster answer to this, Justin, I'll let you go first because this is a tough one, and I'm trying not to make a joke about this because all I'm getting is the Bargnanis in my head right now. I'm trying to have a legit player. Best player will not make the Hall.
That's really tough. I mean, if he didn't just retire, I was going to say Sean Marion. I think he just finds himself on the outside looking in.
Yeah, well, that's a good call. Sean's awesome.
Vince Carter is another one of those.
I think Vince Carter's. He's going to get in. I don't think.
Yeah, he kind of brought basketball to Canada. I think he needs to be recognized.
And like just his raw production, like it really is impressive. Like the
numbers
I'm
just thinking that 1 year with Toronto, that'd be the one.
So technically, this has to kind of be a veteran because it'd be a little presumptuous to say like some.
Not necessarily.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You want my answer?
Do it.
Marc Gasol, because he's been a late bloomer who has elite numbers only for a couple of years, and he's dropping off right now.
But it's still the Basketball Hall of Fame, right? So what he did with Spain also has to be in consideration.
Yeah, I'll match you with Zach Randolph.
Yeah. Hey, that's not a terrible one.
Zach Randolph's been putting up 20 and 10 for a while, right?
Here's another guy that I think might get in, but I'm not positive. Elton Brand, because he put up about 3 years of Hall of Fame production there, and then it really tailed off. I'm a really big fan of what Elton Brand's done in the game, but I just don't think that there's enough there, that there's enough accolades, and that his peak was long enough for him to get in. So I think Elton Brand would probably be my answer, assuming he can't get in. But a lot of these guys, when we're debating it, it's really borderline. Maybe they don't get in right away, but they do down the line. But I think Brand would be the answer I'd go with.
So we're all going with big men in this.
Yeah, kind of sad.
All big men who can't jump.
Play for a long. I forgot that Brand was still in the league, to be honest.
Yeah, no, he
wasn't. He just signed with the Sixers.
My Sixers just need B Diddy and Brand. All right, no, the former Clipper connection. Bring back Darius Miles.
Get Lamar Odom out there.
Lamar Odom.
Yeah,
this makes sense.
We're not doing this.
The 76ers will win more games. And who's this Ish Smith guy? They have to get rid of him. They got to stop winning games immediately.
No. It's a new era for the Sixers. Hinkie's barely in control. Colangelo's taking over.
Wins. They're not going to make the playoffs. They need to lose games.
Phil, any on that topic? Do you have anything else to throw in?
Other than that, Ish happens?
Ish happens, hashtag. Ish happens to the Sixers. On top of that, I mean, you know what I want to add?
Mm-hmm.
NBA All-Stars coming up.
Right.
I'm not going to name names. But when we've been seeing on ESPN the top 10 of this of all time, small forward, power forward.
Oh.
Listen. We don't have to name names. We're not doing this because I know you've both done this before. But what's the more relevant thing towards all time or what they did compared to their time? Because I have such a tough time saying we should judge them against who they were against, because I truly believe you put LeBron James way back when, he would murder these guys way worse than any of these guys do.
Mm-hmm. I hate hypotheticals, so you'll never know what.
You'll never know, but like just in theory, do you think this type of an argument should be based on the player against the era he played in, or all time trying to take that context?
Well, that's all hypothesis. So I can only really judge a guy against his error. The rest is all hypothetical.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think to properly do the comparison, they need to invest more time than they do for these type of rankings, which isn't really a shot at them. I just think to do it properly would be so labor intensive, it'd be ridiculous. You'd have to compare, let's say, true shooting percentage to league average for the position at the time. You'd have to factor in pace, so many different things. I mean, at the time that Will Chamberlain played, Will Chamberlain averaged 46 minutes a game. Yeah. In like a ridiculously high scoring era of the league, like way higher scoring than we have now. So that inflates a lot of things, and you got to factor in possession and things like that. It's just so hard to compare. And
guys in the early years didn't have as much competition. Like as great as Jerry West is, like put him against Russell Westbrook now. Like this is my argument.
And he didn't have a 3-point line.
He didn't, but I don't think he'd be able to shoot over Westbrook. Like.
Right, and then like for the rankings, they had Steph Curry 4th all time out of point guards. Now, I get what he's doing this season. I get how good he was last season, but that just feels premature. Like that feels like you're really projecting a lot that this success continues for about 4 or 5 years to put him there. Because like if you did those rankings, let's say. In Isaiah Thomas's best season ever, and you're not factoring in injuries, you're not factoring in future failures and stuff like that they used to knock the other players on the list, or John Stockton's, for example. You would assume that John Stockton, in the best year of his career, would win a championship at some point. So I think when you're doing this before a player's career is even completed, that you're putting him in the top 5 for his position of all time. Especially a late bloomer. It just seems to be assuming a lot. It's not something I'm really comfortable with. I would put Curry in my top 10 point guards all time.
So none of us agree. Yay.
Yeah, I mean,
but it feels premature. It feels more to create traffic and debate and arguments rather than really provide insight when I see stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bait-click era we live in, and you got to think about longevity. These guys do this for 5, 10, 15, 18 years. If not,
right,
really hard to put someone in the conversation. That's why it's really hard to talk about someone like Drazen Petrovic, who had 3 elite years and then he died. I mean, what do you do with that? That's a difficult conversation to have, but you have to consider that all the time. I gave you one last topic. Justin, do you have one last thing to throw in?
Not really. I mean, obviously, focused on the Cavs with their long road trip. I thought Cavs Spurs. I think that was our first.
It was fun.
It was our second potential finals matchup that we've seen this season. There was the Christmas day that, I mean, both teams shot poorly. Kyrie Irving was in his third game back. I thought Cavs Spurs was a really, really good matchup. I think you had postseason intensity with midseason execution. There was a lot of struggles. There was a good defensive battle, which I thought was a fun throwback. And just to see Popovich, I think Popovich, that was one of the more fun nights that I've seen out of him. His interview with Sager between breaks was absolutely hilarious.
And to see that clip where he called over Tony Parker.
With Tony Parker. That was the greatest.
You're playing good. That's it.
Hey, and the best part about that was Parker had absolutely no idea how to react to that.
Yeah.
It was like somebody's dad.
Right now, I don't know how this actually comes across.
It's like when your dad goes to watch your sporting games for like 10 years, never says a word, criticizes all the time, and then all of a sudden just, hey, you're doing great. Like Parker had no idea what to do. So I thought that was great. I mean, as good as the playoffs are going to be, and I think especially in the East, like that second tier, there's going to be really tightly contested games between those teams. We're not sure who's going to make the Eastern Conference Finals outside of Cleveland. And kind of similar thing out west. It would just be so great if we could have like a best of 31 series between like the Cavs and Spurs, Cavs and Warriors, Warriors and Spurs. Like I want to see how all these teams cross match. And I just, it's unfortunate that the Cavs only get to play one of them. I mean, if you're rooting for Cleveland, you obviously are glad you don't have to play both. But these teams are just, all of them are playing at such a historic level. The Warriors are having one of the best seasons ever. The Spurs have the best defense basically since the shot clock era. And the Cavs, I mean, you got LeBron, who's on the verge of his seventh finals appearance, which is a really impressive number. So you got all these historic teams that are performing at such a high level. I just want to see these matchups already, and I think it's the frustrating point of the year where we see the cream of the crop kind of rise, and we're just waiting for the playoffs to start.
And of course, Kevin Durant on the sideline saying, "Why aren't I getting any attention today?" That's
because you guys have to rely
I
on
think OKC should be in that conversation. Look, as a last little point, they had a stat with that, the lineup of death with Golden State, how they score all these points. It's actually a lineup with that OKC has. They never play with Cantor and I believe Waiters.
It's Waiters, yeah.
Yeah, and Waiters, and they actually outscored them.
Yeah, I mean, but we're also talking about a much smaller sample size. Like you said, they don't often play them. You don't know how good those teams are. Like it's not being used as a closing lineup.
And this is why you have to count OKC in, even though everyone.
No, you don't, because that supporting cast is awful. It doesn't matter how good Russell Westbrook and Durant are. That supporting cast is going to let them down. And I don't believe in their coaching either. I don't think Billy Donovan has done anything better than Scott Brooks at this point. It's harsh, but if you're going to fire a good coach, I'm going to be a little more critical, especially when you're trying to compete for a championship and keep Durant. I haven't seen anything more innovative. I think the blame was cast in the wrong direction. I think the supporting cast isn't good enough for OKC.
Well, we'll save that again for next week. I'm going to wrap up here. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Justin. Sporting Phil, Cavs Anna, Montreal Mark, where you can get all the details below the video. Check out our Facebook, hashtag Hoops Lounge on Twitter, and, of course, our website, hoopslounge.com. Thanks, guys, for being on. See you next time in the lounge.
Peace.